Oh, it started automatically. So welcome everyone. We've just opened the doors to attendees to the webinar. You're warmly welcome. Numbers are coming in one by one, so we'll just hold on a minute or two until the attendees stabilise. We're looking forward to getting started in just a moment. This kind of invisible process on Zoom of everyone arriving invisibly into the room.
I know. Welcome, everyone. We can't see you, but welcome.
And we'll get started in just a moment once the numbers stabilise. Okay, thank you everyone, and a warm welcome to this event on behalf of the AOEC to this webinar. And Haseena, if I hand over to you.
Yes, so welcome everybody. So pleased to have such a big group of you here with us today. So we're really, really pleased on yet another humid day, I have to say. So I hope you are all comfortable, have plenty of water nearby, and are ready to engage in what we hope will be an informative and thought-provoking discussion today. So, by way of introduction, I am Haseena Farid, and I am co-moderating today's event with my colleague, John Gray from the Association of Executive Coaches. So I am South Asian woman with black hair, and I am wearing a red top. My background is I am a consultant and an executive coach working in the arts and the non-profit sectors. And I'm an alumni of the AOEC, a proud alumni, I should say. I'm also co-founder of the Women of Colour Global Network, which is a professional network supporting the advancement of women of colour within the workplace. And we offer mentoring, coaching and training to women of colour, as well as organisations who are committed to making an investment in achieving gender and racial equity within the workplace. John, I'm going to hand over to you. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Haseena. So I'm John Gray, I'm white, I've got glasses and not very much hair and a dark shirt. And I'm part-time faculty for the AOEC and also work freelance as a coach and supervisor and mentor coach. And with a long-term interest in human rights, and really that's been for me one of the spurs in the conversations, Haseena, that you and I have had in putting this event together. So I have a part-time, associate role at the University of York's Centre for Applied Human Rights, which works with human rights defenders at risk.
Thank you, John. That's great. So we are delighted to have you here today. Before we begin, we just have a few housekeeping bits and pieces. So today's event will run for an hour and 15 minutes. We are recording the conversation and you'll be receiving the recording post-event. During the event, we will be hearing from 4 professional coaches, our panelists, and John will introduce them to you in a moment. You will have the opportunity to put forward your questions to our panelists later in the session via a Q&A session that we will have. We ask that if you have those questions in your mind as you go through the event, to please pop them into the Q&A box, and we will read them out later during that part of the session. So the topic for today's webinar is diversity and opportunity in coaching. Now, as we all know, there has been a critical and much needed discourse about the inequities in our society, which was sparked by the global pandemic and the murder of George Floyd. And it's these events that have brought diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the well-being of our diverse employees high up on many organisations' agendas. Coaching, what we all do, is and will continue to be a critical tool for supporting and serving different segments of our workforce and their diverse needs. However, it is no secret that, like many other professions, there is a challenge within, with regards to diversity within the coaching profession itself. And whilst the coaching industry supports DEI, there is still some work to be done within our profession to ensure that we can better reflect and serve the needs of the communities that we work with. But there is, growing awareness of this in our industry, but there might also be a sense that we are not challenging ourselves enough. So the question that is really emerging today for us is, how do we ensure that we embrace, we build and we welcome more diversity within our profession and our industry? And I'm really pleased to say that the conversation has already begun. A brilliant piece of research by Charmaine Roche and Jonathan Passmore from Henley Business School was put together, where they look at racial justice, equity, and belonging in the coaching sector. And if you haven't had a chance, I would urge you to please take a look at that piece of research, as it's one contribution to taking the conversation forward. And we will send you links to that after the event. But I think, as coaches and industry professionals, we all believe that there is more that we can do to further these conversations, to learn from each other and examine how we might, as a sector, instigate change. So today is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to be curious, to learn, as we hear from 4 professional coaches about their experience of becoming a coach, what their experience has been of embracing their identity within their coaching practice, and how their identity has impacted who and how they coach. So we will hear from our panelists first, and then we'll open up the discussion for Q&As. Again, I really hope that you find this an informative discussion and inspiring, and that it will challenge our thinking around how we deal with difference as an industry, and how we can actively support and champion difference within our profession. So John, I'm going to hand over to you to do some contracting, if that's okay, and to introduce our panelists. Thank you.
Indeed. Many thanks, Haseena, for setting the scene there. And so, yes, in the spirit of dialogue, we've aimed to make this as participative as possible for everyone. There's the artificiality of the firewall that separates attendees and speakers and panelists in this kind of event. We really encourage you to use the Q&A button on your through the Zoom controls in order to send in your questions as soon as they occur, and we'll pick those up and feed as many as we can to the panelists within the time that we have. We're aiming to finish at about 1:15, so in just over 1 hour's time. And so, in the spirit of the event, we encourage questions that come from a place of curiosity and respectfulness. And we encourage everyone, all of us here, to listen from a place of being here to learn, here to try out and discover what each of us may need to learn about enabling that embracing and creation of diversity with the industry that we're all so much wanting to take forward. So our 4 speakers, within their time, I will invite you to introduce yourself as much as you need to. All of you are graduates of AOEC programs, and you're all coaches. And the first question that we're going to invite you to respond to is, from your lived experience as a coach, how does your identity influence who and how you coach? So from your lived experience, how does your identity influence who and how you coach? And Tamika, if I turn to you first.
Thank you, John. And I'd just like to say thank you, everybody, for joining us for this very, very important conversation. So, my name is Tamika. I am a Black woman of Caribbean descent. I have bleached curly blonde hair. I'm wearing red glasses and I am 5'9" tall. Now, I run a training, mentoring, and coaching organization. And I decided during the pandemic that I needed to train as a coach. Now, I've used coaching tools throughout my career. My previous profession was a teacher. I taught for 15 years. And I was really excited about finally doing the training. So I joined the AOEC during the pandemic on their executive coaching course. Now, I noticed something immediately. Of my cohort, I was the only Black person on the cohort and one of maybe 2 or 3 people of color. Now, whilst this didn't initially bother me, it made me feel a little bit uncomfortable because I'm not used to being in spaces which aren't diverse. I feel really privileged to have come from a completely diverse background. I grew up in West London amongst a plethora of different communities, different ethnic groups, different cultures. And I just feel privileged to have had that rich cultural experience. And I also received that experience when I went into teaching. I was really fortunate to work in a school that was completely diverse, and the student population and the staff population were representative of each other. And the head teacher was very proactive about ensuring that the students felt comfortable, they felt understood. So I really enjoyed my training. My teachers were amazing. And one of those teachers is actually is a coach for me. And I chose this this coach, because I feel like he had an understanding, he understood difference. So as I moved into my coaching career, I was employed by several organizations who provide on-demand coaching. And immediately I noticed that I was either the only Black coach or 1 or 2 people of color. And as clients chose me for their coaching, they come on the screen, and 88% of those clients were people of color or people from underrepresented or marginalized groups. And I asked them the question, why did you choose me? And they said, we chose you, Tamika, because you're the only person that we felt would understand our experience. And that experience was pretty much the same across the board. This notion of working for organizations who are flying the flags for diversity, but that inclusion isn't filtering down, feeling not seen, feeling not heard, feeling like they're stuck, feeling like if they speak out about their experience, they're going to be sometimes sanctioned. So they were left with this notion of not being understood. Now, when I trained as a coach, part of the training, we explored identity, but I don't feel that I was brave enough to really discuss how my identity, my cultural experience would impact me as a coach. What I've come to recognize is that we're taught as coaches that there's this blank canvas, and every time you have a session with a client, you're adding more color, you're adding more texture, you're adding more insight onto this canvas. But at the moment, the coaching industry has this blank canvas, which only is, somewhat filled with just a couple of colors, just a couple of textures. And I feel that we're missing out on so much rich experience from the world, from the experience that our clients bring to us. And we cannot say that we are an anti-racist organization without being anti-racist. And I feel like this is an opportunity for us to be real agents of change. It starts now, it starts today. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Tamika, for that inspiring start and for sharing your experience. And I'm sorry to hear those aspects of it. Hopefully, it might become a historical experience for other new coaches in the future. Thank you. Daisy, if you're okay to go next, that question around from your experience as a coach, how does your identity influence who and how you coach?
So yeah, thanks, John. I'm Daisy. For audio description, I'm a white British female. I have blonde hair, blue eyes, and I'm wearing white AirPods. So I don't know where to start really. So I trained, like John said, I trained with the Academy of Executive Coaching, and I'm a coach for Mediation Surrey. I also work as a secretary in criminal defence, and I'm a future training solicitor. So I have autism spectrum disorder, which is quite hard to summarise what that is, but it's sort of affects socialising and yeah, I don't really know where else to go. It's such a broad thing. Maybe look it up after the session if you don't know it. So yeah, there's quite a lot of, I think to start with, there's quite a lot of stigma with autistic people, and probably autistic coaches as well, that autistic people don't make good coaches and that they don't feel emotion very well. This actually really annoys me because I actually feel an overload of emotion, maybe sometimes too much emotion. And I also think there is a bit of a stereotype that autistic people are all one same level of autism, and there's a huge spectrum, and you can be further down the spectrum or maybe just touching the spectrum, because I often have people say, oh, I didn't know you had autism, or how do you have autism? You know, you don't look like someone that's got autism. Autism doesn't actually have a look. So that's quite interesting when I hear people say that. So yeah, in terms of coaching, like I said, I feel quite a lot of emotion, and I actually found within my training and within coaching outside of training that I pick up on things that can just be people breathing hard or people like clenching their fists, and I actually pick up on a lot of things that might, you know, people without autism or ASD might not always pick up on. So that's something I wanted to touch on. And also the fact that from my knowledge, there's not actually many autistic coaches, but I don't know if this is actually true, because autism is massively like undiagnosed. I was diagnosed very late with autism, quite literally 2 years ago. And also a lot of people, I think, are scared to tell people that they're autistic, because they're scared that they might be treated differently or viewed that they're not a very good coach. So yeah, I think in terms of something I struggle with as a coach sometimes is that I do struggle to ask open questions. And I think this is because the way my mind is wired, it's quite straightforward, and I quite like to have an answer to things. And I think that's also why coaching has been good for me, because it's meant that I've had to open up my mind to the fact that people might not always have the answers to things, and they might not always know what their next move is, and that's okay. So yeah, I just want to sort of, you know, open people's eyes to autism, and it's, you know, massively, I was trying to do some research before this session and I found nothing on autistic coaches, so that's something in itself really. But yeah, I hope you enjoy the rest of the webinar.
Thank you, Daisy. Thank you indeed. And for sharing your experience and countering the tropes which I am sure many others have come across around autism and neurodiversity. Yeah, and one day, hopefully, there will be research and evidence around the unique contribution that coaches from that perspective.
Maybe I will do it.
Maybe you will. Okay, thank you. So a reminder to those watching, listening, learning from our panelists, do please submit your questions via the Q&A button as soon as they occur to you, and we will bring those in shortly into our process. So Zahida, if you're up for going next, from your experience, how does your identity influence who and how you coach?
Thank you, John, and hello everyone. Yeah, so I'm Zahida Din. For the purposes of audio description, I am a South Asian woman with black hair that's shoulder length, and wearing a blue and white stripy top and glasses. So I'm a second generation British Pakistani, and I coach women in the workplace, and in particular women of colour. And I was thinking we all know the theory as coaches that anyone should be able to coach anyone regardless of your background or the client's background. And to some extent that is true, but it's not quite that straightforward. So I'm going to share one of my early experiences of coaching. I was coaching a senior professional woman of colour, and she said she'd known about coaching for a while, but she'd hesitated to take it up because she saw it as, and I quote, a white person's thing. And that statement really struck me, which is why I'm here today, really, because if people are saying this about our profession, then it's our responsibility to change that perception. So let's take a look at women of colour. So women of colour are disadvantaged in two ways. Firstly, by gender, and then secondly, by race. Very often they'll say they're really tired. And that's from like almost carrying the burden of trying to educate the people around them. And that can be something like there's a certain behaviour at work towards them, then they might spend a few days trying to work out why exactly that was wrong, and then how they're going to assert themselves or explain to that person so that they can treat them respectfully, to something a bit more formal, like work having an expectation that they will maybe lead on an equalities committee and having no consideration for the impact that will have on their workload, not paying them any extra for it, and not really having any consideration, say, for example, the amount of emotional labour that will go into that, which could also be quite triggering for people who are dealing with issues that are really sensitive and personal. But these judgments are made about them as soon as there's some kind of equalities initiative that they should be involved in helping to solve those problems. So women of colour want a coaching space where they don't have to do this work of educating people, where they can be open about what they're experiencing and not be judged. And because I'm a woman of colour, we start with that foundation. There's kind of an understanding there, even though it's unspoken. So technically it could be inaccurate, but the chances are that the person sitting opposite you is going to understand when you talk about things like bias, privilege, institutional racism, discrimination, gender issues, etc., etc., etc. And I just want to share something about myself, which is when I want to talk about race with someone for the first time, there's kind of dance that I do. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. So if I don't know the person, I will drop a little something into the conversation, a tiny little nugget of something about race. And then I'll stand back and watch and see how that person reacts to that little comment. And from that reaction, I'll then decide how much I'm going to divulge. And I'm sure I'm not the only person doing that. So there's something about having a coach that understands race and understands being a woman that means you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that dance. And also it does influence how I coach. Because of the demands put on women, I'm really cautious about creating any additional demands. So for example, I won't ask people to report back to me on their actions. Have they achieved what they said they were going to do? I really need to create a space that's really safe. And coaching is about moving forward, but it also needs to be about a kind of respite, a kind of coming away from the demands, grounding yourself, connection, and then that allows them to move forward with joy and hope. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm carrying that image of joy and hope. And connecting to my own experience of the dance with my clients, as people have spoken to me as Black executives about working on diversity in their organisation, or women clients talking to me about difficult men and managing a patriarchy within their organisation. Thank you, Zahida. And then Paul, to you, how does your identity influence who and how you coach?
Thank you, John, and hi, everyone. For the audio description, I'm a white male with short fur hair, I have a beard, and I'm wearing glasses today and a dark top. So to start with, I consider myself to be quite a novice coach. I've been practicing for a couple of years now. But during that time, I was lucky enough to undertake a master's in coaching and mentoring at Oxford Brookes University. And that offered a huge amount of opportunity and time to reflect on who I was as a coach, and also my journey into coaching. I was particularly interested to really kind of zone in on my life experience as a gay man and how that might have impacted my journey into coaching, choosing coaching as a profession, and how that might show up in my coaching practice. I was particularly interested because I couldn't find anything in the coaching literature around the experience of gay men working as coaching, nothing indeed about the wider LGBT+ community. The only thing I could find was about sports coaches, very US based, and actually it was from a very kind of negative perspective in terms of the discrimination that they faced in their roles. So I positioned my question, my dissertation research question, as kind of how does the development of a positive gay identity impact coaching practice? And I think that 20,000 word project can be distilled down into why gay men make good coaches. The project involved researching interviews with 9 gay men who worked as coaches. And I just wanted to share very briefly some of the headline findings. First of all, what became very clear was that people just had not thought about this before. They have not thought about how they have, what have they learned through their life experience and how that had showed up in coaching, kind of how they've been able to turn negative or challenging situations and life experiences into positives and into strengths. It felt like quite a revelatory discussion often, and very transformative. There was a striking parallel drawn between coaching and coming out. And by coming out, I mean saying, to oneself, to one's family, friends, colleagues, to the wider society, I am gay. And so there was a parallel drawn between the process that someone will go through, potentially, the self-acceptance, the self-reflection, the courage to take a different view, a different route, and parallels drawn between that and the coaching journey. And lots of those words I've just used, I'm sure you would recognize as things that we go through with our clients. And just to read a quote from one of the research participants who said it absolutely beautifully, as coaches, maybe we're encouraging people to come out about lots of things, to come out about insecurity in leadership, to come out about happiness in personal relationships. We're actually inviting clients in many ways to come out about infinite number of things. And we've been there, we've done that. So we've got a kind of innate ability to handle that. I thought that absolutely summed it up really beautifully. But what was also interesting was the kind of skills and insights that came out of the discussions. One being about how, as gay people, we are looking at life in a different way. We are looking at life in a different lens to what is being presented to us, particularly growing up. And actually how that can transform or we can use that in our coaching client relationships, about actually looking at what's being presented to us by our clients in a different way and through a different lens, and ideally helping them to be able to do the same. And also this point about kind of observant skills and listening skills. And this very much came out as a potentially from a point of defensiveness and actually self-protection, looking out to where are the facial clues? What am I hearing in this language? What's being said? What's not being said? Do I feel safe to talk about myself? And how that had been transferred and transformed into a real positive in a coaching relationship. What am I seeing in my clients? What am I hearing? What am I not hearing? How do they seem? The microfacial expressions. But what came out loud and clear was that identity is not fixed, whether that's as a gay man, whether that's as a human being, whether that's as a coach. This is actually a continuous journey. And I think there's also a parallel there to the coaching process that we will all recognize. But in conclusion, really just to say that I don't think what I'm talking about is necessarily just about gay men. This can be applied to many different people. And in essence, for me, it was about how we recognize how we are able to thrive in the face of adversity and how we turn those negative experiences and challenges into positive insight and strengths. And the word that came up often in my discussions was about these superpowers, that actually simply by being ourselves and living our lives, we do get a set of skills and strengths that come with that, but we're so close to it, we don't even recognize them. And so therefore, as coaches, how can we work with our clients to uncover theirs? Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you all. And I'm seeing the reactions that have come up on the screen for all of you as you've spoken and shared your experience. And out of the many things that people have said, what's coming through for me is the impact for each of you, if I've heard it, around that sense of who you are, influencing that sense of the journey with the client. And if I was to pose a general question to you all, this seems to be something that all coaches could and should be doing, extending that question, who am I, into informing their work with their clients. And I wonder for you, what would be the significance for the industry if coaches were to take some of the journeys that you yourselves have done, regardless of who they are and their backgrounds, what that might bring for the depth of their work with their clients. So I don't know if that question lands for anyone, whether any of you four would like to respond about the experience of embracing your identity and what it means for your work.
I don't mind going first.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a very long answer, but I think embracing your identity as a coach actually makes your coaching more powerful, and you're not putting a blockade on yourself, because everybody's unique, everybody's different. And actually, you know, if you're open about that and, you know, use these things to your advantage, like the fact that I have autism, you know, I use that to my advantage. I can think outside the box, I can do this, I can do that. So actually, you know, what makes you unique is not a disadvantage, you know, it's an advantage.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I think for me, my experience of as being a coach is just exploring difference in my own identity. And I love what Paul said about our identity not being fixed. I've done a lot of work personally on myself, and I used to have a very fixed mindset about who I was. And I'm still working on becoming this new version of myself, the most authentic version of myself. And as I do that work, some of that work translates onto my clients and getting them out of this fixed thinking of, I am this person, I've come from this background, I'm having this experience, and this is who I am. And that's just not true. So I think identity, or perceived identities, is a real piece of work that I'm doing with myself, and that transfers into my coaching. I'm not a coach that just coaches people of color or people from underrepresented groups. I'm a coach who coaches humans, and that's my identity.
I would ask the question, why would you not want to ask the question to yourself as a coach? You know, in many ways, that's what we're kind of working with our clients on, around finding out who they are. So why would we not want to ask that about ourselves? I do also think that sometimes then maybe we have to recognize that we can't always answer the question, because there is so many influencing factors on who we are, whether it's the situation we're in, whether it's the person that we're talking to, whether it's how we're feeling that day. But I think to have that open mind surely is a good thing. I can't really understand why you would not want to have that in the back of your mind, in terms of kind of wanting to understand who you are as a coach.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to that what Paul was saying about when you've got confidence in who you are, it gives other people confidence to be who they are, and you're kind of creating quite not a safe space, but almost a brave space, I would say, by allowing yourself to really be who you are and being confident in that, then gives other people permission to do the same. And I think that's such an important skill in coaching.
Indeed. It's the uniqueness of the coach-client relationship depending so much on who the people are, as much as the work that they are there to do together. So, so many questions to ask you. I think at this point, Haseena, I will hand over to you for you to begin to feed in from participants, their contributions.
Yes, thank you so much, John. And already such a rich discussion happening. I've got a few questions here to feed in. The first one's from Sarah. She's made a comment that she was trying to include coaching in a funding proposal recently, but was told that it wasn't relevant because it was middle class. And she was really saddened by that. So her question really is around, what can we do to move beyond these types of perspectives? And I wonder if I'm going to throw it out there to the panel, whoever would like to go first to answer that, that'd be great. Any thoughts?
I think, Haseena, it's all about visibility.
Yeah.
And for the coaching world to ensure that representation is visible. So, for example, when I was researching coaching organizations that I wanted to join, I saw the same types of avatars, the same types of imagery, and none of that imagery reflected who I am or the background that I come from. So I knew what kind of, the representation was and what the coaching world looked like on the outside. However, I do know coaches that are completely representative of the society. But even just in basic marketing and advertising, it's not being seen or demonstrated enough.
Thanks, Tam. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on that, actually. It's something that I've also been privy to, and seeing that the more we actually do events like this, the more we demonstrate that, coaches of all diverse backgrounds exist, that is a really good starting point. Thank you, Tam. Anyone else who'd like to comment on that?
I can go, Haseena.
Yes, please.
I was interested in the statement in terms of why it wasn't appropriate, and the obvious question is, well, what does that actually mean, and what's that based on, and where's the evidence? What are we actually talking about here? I agree totally with what Tamika said there about visibility, and also maybe we need to just be clearer about what coaching is. I mean, this goes to the fundamental roots of, I guess, the profession, but what is it, and actually how can we show examples very clearly of the developmental or the transformational power that coaching can have? So it's definitely about visibility, and there's different ways of looking at that, I think.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, I'm really hearing that. So, as much as visibility, it's also about talking about what coaching is, and as you say, being quite bold about, that it is representative, that it is inclusive. The very ethos of coaching is also about inclusivity. Anyone else? Before I move on to the next question, there's so many, so I feel like I should get on to the next, but I'd like to give an opportunity. Daisy, Zahida, would you like
I'll just be brief.
Yeah.
I just wondered if there was something that needs to be done about who receives coaching. So if you go into organisations, it's often senior people. And if you look at who the senior people are, there's a bit of a monoculture going on up there in terms of, this was a question about class, in terms of class, but you can look at other characteristics, and also you see that they're not present in those senior levels. So, I mean, because coaching for things like career progression, that's relevant. It doesn't matter how far along in your career it is. So this idea that actually it's only for people who are senior to get more senior and to become really good at these jobs that are very stressful, it's almost kind of undemocratic in a way, that maybe there's something we could do as a coaching profession to say, actually, if you're offering it there, perhaps you could offer it across the board, and you could offer it to people in all different positions, because everybody's entitled to progression and support in work.
Yeah, thank you, Zahida. John, did you want to add?
I was going to say, I remember Peter Hawkins reporting a comment from a participant from South Africa in a workshop about coaching, being introduced to coaching, and this participant saying, it sounds like it's a privilege for the already privileged. And one of my desires is to get beyond that sense of this is something that somehow some people deserve and some people don't deserve. The risk, the word executive coaching could imply executive senior.
Yes.
At the AOEC, we mean that to mean work-based coaching at any level. But the word itself carries a problem.
That's a really interesting point. Actually, I was actually asked yesterday by a potential new coachee who said to me, "So, what does executive mean in this case?" Because I thought it was just about senior leaders. So I think that's a really good point, John. If we can be more explicit, maybe that's what it is. We just need to be a bit more explicit about what we mean by these terms if we're going to use them. Anyone else? Daisy.
I would totally, repeat what the others said as well. They answered the question really well. And also to, I think we're starting the push now and to just keep, holding events and advertising, not just, one category of people. And yeah, I think that was a good point that you said about the executive thing, and that people have some sort of stereotype that it's only for people that are really high up, and that's not true. So I think sort of spreading the news and making it more public that anyone can have coaching and it's not just one category.
Thank you everyone. And I think you've all kind of you've all said some really interesting things there, but I think visibility is the thing that I'm hearing from all of you. This next question is from Matthew, so I'm going to move on. And Matthew says, this question is for everyone, but inspired by Zahida. So how does one manage the tension of wanting to work with people from your own your own ethnic background versus wanting to do work with different communities, so wider communities, diverse communities? Who would like to go first? Zahida, maybe you can, seeing as though you inspired.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So that tension between wanting to serve everybody and serving people from your own community, I think, like for me, I started off just offering coaching, and the clients told me, but the makeup of the clients just happened, and I could clearly see there was a need out there. So I will happily coach anybody. I don't discriminate in that sense, but there is a shortage of people of colour in coaching, and I know that people want that. So but on the other side of that, there's also a question around your own well-being as well, because as a coach you're then working with issues that are quite close to you, and how much of that you can hold comfortably and and still remain a good coach without taking on so much stuff that is it can feel quite deep, because there is a personal connection there with those issues that come up.
Thank you. Yes, I think that's a really good point. You have to also look after yourselves as coaches. I think that's really important. And I just mentioned, I slightly worded that question incorrectly by just focusing on ethnic minorities. But actually, what we're talking about here is how does one manage the tension of wanting to work with people of your communities and the broad spectrum of communities. So can I ask someone else to answer that question?
I'll go. So from my own personal experience, I wanted to retrain as a coach for years, and it was very, very expensive. So when I was finally given the opportunity, I have my own business. It's a training, mentoring and coaching business called Tremenco. It's a community interest group. So it was really important for me to be able to deliver coaching either pro bono or at a very kind of, lower cost to people that want it but can't afford to have it. So part of my organization, I work with individuals that just unable to afford coaching, and we're able to put in for funding. I work with neurodiverse clients, and through a grant called Access to Work, they're able to receive executive coaching from me. And then I do my corporate work. So my corporate work feeds into the community aspect of my work, working with underrepresented individuals or, marginalized groups from across the spectrum. So that's how I'm able to do it. I just don't want to get paid by being a coach by the privilege. I want to help people access coaching who are unable to afford it.
Thank you, Tam. Yeah, really important point there. And Paul, do you have something to add to this?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and I'm sat here thinking about the word tension, actually,
Yeah.
which I personally don't recognise. I'm reflecting back to some of the discussions I had in my research, and it came up quite often, the whole kind of dynamic of gay coaches working with gay clients, and there was quite mixed views, really. Some people kind of, talked about their work within their community on their website and in their kind of blogs, etc. Some people didn't say anything, but certainly from my perspective, it wouldn't be something I would not say or not bring up if it kind of felt like it was the appropriate thing to do. So it's I'm looking at this slightly differently, I guess, but it's I don't kind of really recognize the word tension personally, but that's just a personal view there.
Yeah, and actually just listening to everyone, I don't think any of you recognize that that word tension either. And from what you've said, it seems as though you are actually supporting diverse communities, as well as as Tam was saying, a focus around underrepresentation as well within those communities. Thank you. Right, let's go on. I have a few more questions. So this is a good one. This is from Zahir. What are the most things which attract people in need of coaching in the first place? So what are the things that attract people in need of coaching in the first place? How do we display these skills or these talents to help them gain how do we display these skills or talents so that they're aware of what a good coach looks like? Thanks, from Zahir. Did you get that? So who would like to go first? So what are the things that need to be in place to attract people in need of coaching in the first place?
I can go first, Haseena.
Yeah, please.
And I'm so sorry, but it's such basic things to say, but I'll say them anyway. I mean,
yeah.
That ability to connect and to be open and to listen.
Yeah.
Often we may be working with clients who've not been listened to or been shut down, and actually just having that openness from the start surely is a positive thing. It sounds really basic to say, but I think it's perhaps something that is sometimes forgotten.
Thank you, Paul. Anyone else wants to add to what Paul's just said?
I think, sorry, you
go ahead, Daisy.
Okay, I just think being non-judgmental about people that you coach, and actually just going in with an open mind and letting your questions flow, because I think people can tell if you're sat there thinking about your next question, just to let the conversation flow, and to treat them like a normal person.
Yeah, I like that, treating people like normal people.
Not that a normal person is a real thing.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
Just to treat them like a human.
A human being. Yeah, I think we all knew what you meant, Daisy.
If there is a normal person, I'm not one of them, so.
Zahida, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that it can really help if you allow people to meet you before they sign up and have a good amount of time before you're asking them to commit to spending 6 sessions with you. They're testing the water, like I talked about that dance that they do. There's kind of a testing of the waters that happens in that time, and it can feel a bit of a tall ask to ask people to suddenly commit maybe to 6 sessions and part with that cash, without actually having that reassurance at the beginning. Yeah,
I hear you on that. There is something there, isn't it, about sort of being aware of what people can also fund, being aware of people's economic sort of, I totally agree. And there's another question I kind of wanted to ask, really, and this is, I'm just moving away from the Q&As for a second, but I'm interested in what you feel are the kind of entrenched attitudes or prejudices within the coaching industry, or the bodies that you've been part of, which you feel need to be overturned. Love to sort of get your perspective on that. Who wants to go first?
I think the assumption that coaches, the coaching organisation is wholly inclusive.
Okay, so the assumption that the coaching profession is wholly inclusive. Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, and I think also just going off what Tamika was saying in terms of inclusivity, I've also found that there aren't many young coaches. So I think, you know, going off of that stereotype that all coaches are, you know, people of the older generation, not people, you know, I'm 20, I don't know anyone else as a coach. So it'd be nice to sort of encourage, you know, younger people that they could be coaches as well. And it's not just, you know, people that are, you know, 10, 20 years older than me. Don't want to offend anyone here, but people that are older than me, you know, you can be a coach at whatever age, obviously probably over 18, but at any age, you know, it doesn't, you don't have to be a certain age to be a coach.
Okay, so changing the perception really, you know, because actually it is a diverse, as you say, you know, that we have a diverse range of coaches of all different ages, and making sure that that's something that's clearly articulated. Anyone else?
Haseena, I think there's something about coaching kind of education and training, and just reflecting on my own experience, diversity is often covered, but it's covered in such a broad, generic way. I think it's really important, which is a kind of thing what you're doing today, but it's really hearing the voices of you know, of many different coaches and the different experiences they bring. So, you know, I think if that can be incorporated perhaps more into training and to education around coaching and mentoring, then that's a positive.
I think that's a really good point, Paul. And it's something that I notice actually on my training, that it's, whilst, you know, we instinctively think, you know, coaching, it's inclusive, it's, you know, the very ethos of coaching is about non-elitism, all of these kind of things. When you go to the training, you know, and the training is absolutely fantastic, but it's interesting how what we don't say in the training, and maybe we should just reflect on that a bit more and think about, you know, are there things that we should be explicitly saying to make people within that training feel comfortable, but also to open up the conversation. I think that there should be space within the training to discuss some of this, like we are today, if there is an opportunity to do so. Great point, thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about the membership organisations. I think they really need to be driving this. There should really be this kind of at that top level with the ICF and the others. They should really be pushing the agendas for anti-racism, gender equality, or inclusion of every kind. Because I know I had a really disappointing experience when I went to membership organisations, and as you know, as part of my welcome email, I was asked why I joined, and then I explained and said I'd be interested to know how I can use coaching for social justice around race, and I didn't get anything. Didn't get anything back, and I think actually I had to really push to get an answer, and then even then I didn't really get an answer. The answer was that we imagine that's been covered by your course, so they really didn't know what to do with the question around equality. Yeah. This is one of the big players. So I just think that's extremely disappointing when you see it at that level.
Yeah. And, you know, and I know we're talking about the coaching industry here, but what you've described, Zahida, is something that I'm seeing across the board with different industries as well, where there has been that kind of clear outward statement. And I think, you know, absolute, you know, intention to want to do this, but like you say, perhaps not having the right advisors or the right, you know, themselves not having been through an education process to really understand how to answer those questions. So there's something there, isn't there, about the industry itself reaching out and finding the right people to come and help them shape their thinking, and as you say, you know, challenge them as well. Thank you. I'm going to swiftly move on because there's so many questions coming in, and I don't think I'm just, I know I'm going to disappoint people here. I don't think I'm going to be able to get through all of them, I'm afraid. But this is a good one. And this touches back on a little bit about Daisy, what you were saying about having different, ages, coaches of all different ages. So this is from Maddie. She's saying, how can older coaches appeal to young clients? I've had people saying, I'm young, I don't need coaching, as in they're perceiving it as a tool for other generations rather than it is a tool for their own. So anyone who wants to, got any ideas?
I would sort of maybe stem off that and sort of ask why, why do you think that it's only for older generation? Why can't young people have it? And see where that sort of stemmed from. So it might be that they've heard that from others, or something. I'm trying to think out the box. It might be something, they've been brought up that it's only for older people, or they've not had an inclusive household, or so I definitely question why they have that view in the first place, and maybe stem on from there and challenge that. Why can't you have coaching?
Yeah, so ask them the question, get some more insight. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Anyone else? Has anyone been on the receiving end of that either? No.
For me, there's a question about how young can you be to be coached, and whether there's a set of experiences or stage of life where mentoring or advice may be more needed than. What do you think? That's a very, I'm not meaning to make a general point about that, but there's something around coaching not thinking that it's the answer to everything. Yeah, very good point. And also, I guess, as coaches, to add to that, John, being just cognizant, right, of as we probably all do actually, when you're working with a client, knowing that this might not be the right approach for them, and being aware of what other approaches are there, and to be able to offer those as options. We are also, as coaches, I think a lot of what we do is about signposting, I think, as well, and raising that awareness. So yeah, I agree. Anything else? Any other thoughts, anybody?
My other thing is, if you're feeling almost a bit like a disruptor, if you feel like you're going into a space where coaching doesn't happen, then you have to think about how you take coaching to that market. And maybe it is a case of offering it for free to a few people and watching the ripples come out from that. If it does have a positive effect, people talk, and perhaps other people in that generation haven't experienced it, so no one's talking about it. But it's like working with any community. It's how you do outreach work in the arts, or you go to them and then you show what you're doing, and then if it works, people talk about it.
Yeah, thanks, Zahida. I like that. If it works, then we can talk about it. I like that a lot. Just really quickly, this is a question that came in even before this event started, so I must ask it. So a question that came in, what gets in the way of your confidence when coaching a diverse range of clients? Who's going to ponder on that and give me a response? I mean, I can kick off. I sometimes find that, and it probably goes to what Tam was saying earlier, that actually, when you are, I obviously am a particular demographic, and I have unique challenges that I also go through, as a woman of colour, as a coach, but also in my sort of professional life. And when I'm coaching diverse clients, I'm not thinking necessarily about anything to do with me, but I do think that there are times when, if someone has a unique challenge that I perhaps don't have the skills or the insight to be able to to really go deep with them on those particular things, that's when I might start to feel like a bit of confidence, you know, thinking, you know, as a coach, you know, should I be, you know, is there this question that I should be asking that I can't reach, and that's an interesting one, because, and I think it goes back to everything that we've been talking about today, is that actually there is a rationale to be saying here that as coaches, you know, the very essence of what we do is to be empathetic, is to listen, and we should be able to do that with anybody, you know, irrespective of whether you understand those unique challenges that somebody might be going through or not. So I think for me, that's probably, yeah, something that I've, you know, been challenging at times, but I've come to think that actually the essence of what we do as coaches is we're there to be in service of that person, and I think that's also really good enough. So what I'd like to think, yeah, where does your confidence start to rattle?
When I first started executive coaching, I found myself in quite challenging coaching conversations. And what I recognized in those conversations was my thinking. That I needed to find the answer, or I needed to find the question. And what I've come to accept is sometimes it's just not there in that moment.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
And again, going back to human, forgetting about the mask, forgetting about, you know, the visuals or the energy of what that person is saying, and just sitting with it for a moment. And then before you know it, it comes. Just holding that space and being accepting of the fact that I'm not always going to get it right, and that's okay. But just to try to do my best to hold my client and support my client in the moment.
I like that, Tam. Try to do my best and hold my client. Yeah.
I would agree with Tamika, actually. And I would say that my little fear is having a client that's quite closed. So my answer just, you know, one-worded, two-worded answers. So, you know, realizing that that's actually okay, and that the silence is okay. It's okay to have a session where you might be silent for a couple of minutes or 5 minutes, or even if they don't want to talk for the whole session, and just being okay with the fact that coaching might not be for everyone, and also the fact that they might be 1 or 2 words, you know, answers for this session, the next session they might be more confident. So it could be a whole array of issues why that person is, you know, isn't that interested in answering the questions.
Thank you, Daisy. Yeah. Being okay with silence. Isn't that what we're taught?
Yeah, John.
On our training. Anyone else? Paul, have you got any thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you know, I grew up in the 80s. It was a very different time to be gay then. You know, I grew up through the AIDS crisis and a huge kind of discrimination that came with that against gay people. I sort of lived through Section 28, which basically shut down any kind of positive promotion of being gay. And really a lot of that, while I've moved on from it, I'd like to think there is a huge amount of, you know, I think many gay people will recognize that kind of internalized shame and that homonegativity that comes with that. And I think sometimes that does still appear, not just in coaching, but in other kind of encounters with people. And that, you know, that kind of, you know, fear of rejection and fear of kind of being undermined or ridiculed, you know, quite frankly, it doesn't all go away. And, you know, I do think that crops up in different situations, potentially in coaching as well. But I'd like to think that, you know, I would remind myself that this is about the client, this isn't about me, and to be aware of those fears or that kind of those feelings that I'm having, to make sure that it doesn't get in the way of the relationship with that client.
Yeah, brilliant point. Brilliant point to end on. I think, yeah, I hear that. the fear, the kind of the inner critic that we all have that still rests there on our shoulder, but actually reminding ourselves in those moments that we are there to be in service of the client, you know. Again, something that I think we're taught on our course. But yeah, thank you, Paul, for sharing that. That's really insightful. Thank you. So I feel like we've come to the end of our Q&A session. I knew it would fly by, and apologies again to those of you who I didn't get around to asking your questions, but I hope we've been able to get a broad discussion here, and as I ask as many questions as possible. So we now are nearing the end of this event. So I think before we sort of close everything off, there's one last question really from me that I want to ask the panelist, which is really in the spirit of coaching, and we're all coaches here. I'd like to invite you to think of one key action that we can all take to embrace, build, and welcome more diversity in the coaching profession. So I'm going to get you to think of one thing and share that with us all. Daisy, I'm going to go to you.
I've been dropped in a deep end.
One thing.
I think speaking about it more. Yeah, definitely having the conversations more with people, rather than just maybe once at the beginning of the session, never talked about again, to carry on this conversation. It's never, I don't want this conversation ever to end. So yeah. So
keep speaking, keep conversing.
And educating.
Yeah. And educating. Fantastic. Thank you. That's a really tangible thing that we can all contribute to.
I would like to second what Daisy said. I think we need to be unafraid to speak, and we need to be unafraid to challenge when we see things like colour blindness. So I particularly spoke to the director of one of the organisations I work with, and I brought it to her attention, the lack of representation.
Yeah.
And her response was that she didn't feel equipped to enough. She was almost scared to challenge. She said, I'm a white working class woman and I don't have the understanding. And she was honest about that. But, we've reached a resolution, which is great, which is mean change is going to happen. So don't be afraid to speak up or challenge.
Thanks, Tam. And I'm hearing there that, you weren't afraid to speak up either. And, you invited, allowed her to obviously feel safe enough to be able to express herself to you. So I think that's... Well,
actually, that's not true, Haseena.
Oh,
I held off.
Oh, did you?
I held off, but I started to feel uncomfortable. And I said, I have a duty, number one, to myself, but also to that organisation and everybody that benefits from that organisation.
Wow. Wow, even more powerful then. Thank you. Anyone else? Zahida.
I'm going back to my point that I made right at the beginning about educating. And I think about how you can educate the organisations that you work with just by how you interact with them. And when you're looking at the pool of people that you're being asked to coach, perhaps working in partnership with someone from a more diverse background could enhance what you're delivering. And just even bringing that up, whether it happens or it doesn't happen, having that conversation will change minds and hearts and minds around diversity.
Thank you. Yeah, an important point, I think, about look at who, be resourceful and see who else is out there. You might not be able to do it yourselves, but who can you bring in? And as you say, just to instigate that conversation internally is a change in itself. Thank you. Paul.
I think to add to everything that's been said, which I totally agree with, and I think there's something about not making assumptions. And actually, the person in front of you will have had a life experience that they have been able to turn into a strength. A negative, a challenging situation, something that hasn't worked out, they will have found a way of turning that into a strength. And how can we help our clients kind of uncover that?
I like that. How do we help our clients uncover when they've turned something, you know, which is a strength, actually turned it around into a strength? I love that. And I wonder what, John, you might say as well to this question.
For me, there's something about coaches being aware of blind spots that may be present in their coaching model, particularly blind spots that may mean we do not feel empowered to notice and challenge structural or institutional discrimination. So positive psychology has made a great contribution to the coaching industry. But if it's taken too far, it's, well, you just need to be more pushy, more assertive, more challenging, dream better. And so I'm encouraging myself and around how can I support my coaching where appropriate to challenge the barriers that exist in clients' organizations and cultures that they are encountering. And not just to think it's all about the client and what can they do. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I was going to ask you that. It's what can we do as much as the client. Yeah, I'm really hearing that. And actually, that's a really good point, I think, to end on, because I feel that it is really about what we can all do, you know, one small, big action, whatever it might be, to feel comfortable, to feel confident, to feel okay, to speak out, to reach out to our community, to have these discussions and to create spaces like this where we feel safe to do so. And I think for me, that's a big takeaway, which is really about, you know, I think we can all do something and we can all contribute to this wider landscape to be able to make changes in our own industry. So I just want to we've coming to the end now, and I want to thank all of our panelists. You have been amazing. Thank you so much. I feel that you've been so open, and it's not always easy to do that when we're having these conversations. So I thank you so much for sharing your personal insights, for taking the time to making the time to come and have this really rich discussion with us all. So thank you. And I hope for our audience, this has been thought-provoking. You've got a few ideas of things that you might want to take away. If any of you out there feel that you'd like to reach out to any of us on the panel here and co-moderators with any other questions, please, you know, come via me. I will send you our details after the event, and we will be sharing, or the AOEC I should say, will be sharing a follow-up email after the event, so you'll get a recording, you'll get this recording, and we'll also share links with some of the research that we mentioned. So earlier on I mentioned a piece of research by the Henley Business School, so we'll share that with you, and so many other links of sort of books and things like that that we might signpost to you that might be worth reading. There's a lot out there. That's the other thing. There's a lot of sort of noise out there about DEI, but you know, if we can sort of signpost you to things that you might not have heard of, that might be of interest to you. So we will do that as well. So thank you. So please, we would encourage you, keep the conversations going. And if you have any suggestions or ideas, because we want to keep the conversation going. This is a one-off, it feels like a one-off event, but it's not really. We want to ensure that an event like this carries on. So if you have any other ideas of events or things that we as in the industry should be doing, let us know, and we will take those forward. So thank you so much. John, would you like to say some final words to our... Well, to echo the thanks, and again, I'm seeing the reactions coming for all of you for the way in which you have spoken from the heart, which I know has benefited us all. So thank you all, everyone. We'll close the webinar here and look forward to ongoing conversations.
Thank you all. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Well done, everyone.